Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, fantastic. So I see we have online Erin. Can you say hi?
Yep.
We know that.
Hi.
Hello, Erin. Hanif,
Hello.
are you
I don't know
there?
if you can hear
Hi.
me.
Hi. Mary.
Hello.
Hi, Mary. Nigar.
Yes, hi.
Stacy.
Yeah, hello.
Hello, Stacy. Fantastic. Thank you for joining me today. So we have now entered our second week of the project plan. How is everybody doing? How are you feeling?
Pretty good.
Pretty good?
Yeah. Understanding what I'm reading.
Okay. Anyone confused with the process of what we need to do? Everybody happy?
Yes, I am.
Yes?
I'm happy.
Yeah.
Happy. I can hear we have school holidays going on, right?
Yes.
Fantastic. Okay, so firstly, I would just like to start with quite an important announcement. I was just looking into the assessment dates and noticed that the last assessment is due a week after our trimester is meant to end. So it was entered into the diary incorrectly. So I would just like you to be very sure as to when assessments are due. So we have 3 assessments for this unit. The first is due, as it always was, on the 24th of April. The second one is the 8th of May, and that's what it was previously. But the third one has been brought forward 1 week. So it is now due on the 15th of May. So that is the beginning of our 6 weeks. So that's why it needs to be due on the 15th of May. So please diarize and make a note. It has been changed in Blackboard, so you should see it correctly displayed now is the 15th of May. Can I just ask, because we have a lot of noise conflict going on in the background, unless you are talking, can you please just turn your mic off so that we don't have a lot of noise happening in the background? Okay, sounds a lot better. All right, so what are we doing today? Today we are launching into module 2 of our work. And up to now, everyone should have been through module 1. I hope, and I do see, I remember one of you, I'm trying to think who it was. Was it you, Stacy, that attended the orientation session? I'm almost sure I saw someone's face popping up when I saw the recording. Did anyone attend the orientation session? Yes, sorry, your mic's off now. Thank you. Thank you for attending. I hope it was worthwhile. So if you do have any questions regarding how you maneuver Blackboard or anything like that, you can just send me a message and happy to assist you along the way. So today we are looking at our whole project development stage. So that's when we are putting plans into place and trying to schedule our activities. So we are looking at preparing the project plan, looking at a work breakdown structure, which we'll go through. I know it sounds a bit like gibberish for you now. We're looking at budgets, risk management, how do we gain approvals, recruit teams, etc. So if you can see my screen, and I can see that we have a few videos that are sort of interrupting the view here, which I'd love to sort of, let me try to get rid of it a little bit. It's better. So we have the project plan in process. And the first thing is to know that we need to identify what are our project activities. Before we know what these little bite-sized pieces that we have to do, we have to, but there's just no ways we will be able to achieve our end result. So we have to break the project into little pieces. We also need to know what are the timings of those activities. So step 2 here, you can see it says determine sequence of activities. So we need to have a bit of a staging of events taking place. Once we know in what order it will be taking place, we need to estimate the time and the resources required. So we need to know how long it's going to take, Are we going to use people, equipment, plants, contractors? What are we needing to get on board so that we can achieve our end goal? We need to prepare a draft of our plan, because remember, if we don't plan, we are certainly going to fail. And we need to circulate that to our stakeholders. So stakeholders need to be communicated throughout the project. Otherwise, they feel like they are not involved in it, they haven't been consulted, and when things go very wrong at the end, you will pretty much know why. That's because we have failed to communicate with everybody on board. So we have to set up a schedule and make sure that we know on what day, what is going to take place. Are we having meetings? Are we having emails? Are we having Skype meetings, phone calls? And who is responsible for each of those? And then we have to finalize our project plan. On the sides here, you can see who the responsible parties are for each of these activities. So it's either the client, experts, contractors, or suppliers. So we need to make sure that everybody is very clear as to what is taking place, in what order, who is responsible, so that when we are monitoring and making sure that we're on track, we know who to look at when we need assistance in whatever area it is. So what goes into this project plan? So we have to have an overview, we have to have agreements, we have to know which human resources are involved in everything. We need to consider our activities and know what the dependencies are in each of these. And if a deviation from our goals occurs, these things need to be addressed by our project manager. As soon as things start going off on a tangent, we need to nip it in the bud and make sure that we get everything back on track. So I don't know if you've heard of a concept called scope creep before. Anyone out there? You can turn your mics on. Scope creep? No one chatting? Okay, I'll help you out. So scope creep is when the scope, which is the definition of our project, goes off the given path that we have set for it. So we were assuming we were going to satisfy activity A, B, and C, but suddenly activity D has been thrown into the mix. This could be a potential issue. Why? Because we have constraints. We have a budget, we have time, we have quality, and we have the scope that needs to be considered. As soon as you throw in another element into the mix, these constraints are going to go in one way or the other. So it might increase our time, it might make it very cash-strapped in terms of our budget. So we have to make sure that we're on track, going according to schedule. So we've got a few sort of charts, graphs, and control systems that we're going to look to that help manage our whole project and make sure that we're on track. So it's actually quite a meaty module, which I really like, and gets you to the nitty-gritty of what goes on in project management in the background. So the first thing we've got is called a work breakdown structure. And how it's actually portrayed to you here, I'm not totally mad about, and I'll tell you why. The reason is that the way each of these levels are shown, it makes you get a little bit confused when you have to create your own. So you will notice that you actually have to construct a work breakdown structure in your assessment. And because everything is shown to you going sort of horizontally across, we then start getting confused as to what level 1 objectives are, level 2, and level 3. So our level 1 is all of our project outcomes. So they are normally shown, and I'll show you another version which I prefer in a second. They're normally shown going the other way across the page. So they're shown going horizontally across. From our main outcomes, and so let's say we've got a really big project and we break it up into, let's say, 4 major outcomes. We then get our level 2s, which are known as activities. And you can see here it says activity 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Those are our level 2s. Our level 2 activities are then broken up further into a task 1.1 related to activity 1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4. This is just random. So there might be 4 tasks, there might be 6, there might be 2. So as you can see for activity 2, you see that it's 2.1, 2.2. That's just for this example. Activity 3 gets broken up into 4 little pieces. Activity 4 doesn't have any tasks associated. And activity 5 has 2, 5.1 and 5.2. Graphically, I think it makes a lot more sense if it is displayed something like this. And this is how I would like you to construct yours. So here, this is just a random example. It's a house ready for first viewing. It's broken it up into this first level here, which is level 1. So each of this first level of rectangles are level 1 different project outcomes. From our level 1, and you can see in this instance, it's displayed horizontally across and not vertically, because that's when we start getting confused. Each of these outcomes have been broken up further. So this gray box over here for estate agent arrangements made, we have take house off the market, retake photos, and move viewings till after done. So here you can see we've got our level 1, level 2, and level 3. So each of these have been broken down. I prefer it when you actually display it this way, because then we don't get confused within, which way things need to be broken down into. So a summary element is where a unit of work is decomposed further. So you can see here for estate agent arrangements made, that's broken down further into these 3 items over here. A detailed element are these things over here because they can't actually be broken down any further. So they're at the lowest level of the work breakdown structure. So what is a work breakdown structure? It takes our whole objective, in this case it says house ready for first viewing, breaks it down into bite-sized chunks and takes each of these elements and breaks it down further to try to get a very nice diagrammatic view of what is this whole map that we are trying to achieve. If we just look at a big project and say, okay, a house ready for first viewing, where do we start? What are the main things we need to do? We will really get very lost if we don't take an approach of making some sort of structure to try to identify what are the things that are required. So this is all very well and good, but what we then need to think about is what is the schedule of each of these things. So we need to place time in the mix here. And that's when we're going to look at a few different options. The most popular is known as a Gantt chart. And I will show you what's being given to you in your module. So a Gantt chart really was developed by Henry Gantt during the World War. And you can see across here, horizontally, you have your days. So in this case, it's broken up into days. It might be weeks, it might be months. It just depends on the nature of the project. So you've got days 1, 2, 3, all the way across. Down here, it could either say milestone or it could elaborate and say what the milestone is. So in the previous example, I showed you that house for viewing. One of the milestones, for example, could be estate agent arrangements made. So that milestone would be placed under activity over here. And you could see that the bar chart across shows you how long milestone 1 is going to take. So it's going to take 1 to 3 days. This diamond shape over here shows a milestone. Now, this Gantt chart has actually been shown only with milestones. Other Gantt charts might have activities and might not have each activity being a great milestone. So this one just shows milestones, but it could be various activities and only some of them are associated with a milestone, that it has a great accomplishment at the end of it. So you've got to be aware that certain activities need to take place before another one can take place. So let's say you need to paint a room. You need to take the furniture out of the room before you can paint the room. So that activity, for example, would be here. Take all that furniture out the room, then you can start preparing the room to be painted. So it has to have either a finish before the other one can start. So there's different lag and lead time. So certain activities need to finish before the next can start. Certain activities need to start before the next one can start. certain activities need to finish before the next one can finish, and certain activities need to start in order for the next to finish. So there's either a lag, meaning it lags behind, or a lead time, means it goes forward. So you don't have to totally freak out about what's a lag, what's a lead time, but you just need to understand that certain activities need to start before others finish, certain activities need to finish before others start. So we do have software that can help us with Gantt charts. Even Excel, you can create a Gantt chart in Excel. We have created a very basic template in your assessment, but you are more than welcome to go ahead and find more equipped software and create a Gantt chart that is a little more sophisticated. So the next type of method we're talking about is called critical path analysis. And that looks something like this. So that's ordering tasks according to dependencies and the time taken. So we are trying to get that critical path, the quickest way of achieving our end goal. So here's activity A to B, B to C, and you can see what needs to transpire before another can occur. So activity E, for example, can't take place until you've been through the whole critical path of A to B to C to D to E. One step more complicated than that is known as a PERT chart, or a program evaluation review technique. And that's when we talk about things like these little numbers underneath. So it's really a critical path method, but what it's doing is it's looking at what's the optimistic time. So in this case, it says 1 day. What's the most likely time? That's 3 days. And what's the pessimistic time? That's the 5 over here. And that's when you can get a little more accurate in your estimations. So those are the main things. There are a few others for you to read through in terms of different types of schedules and charts that we use in project management. Very importantly, we need to consider our risks when we think about projects. Risks are pretty much inherent in everything that we do, especially projects. They can be classified into an organization risk. That means it affects the whole organization. A project risk, that's just particular to the project. A task risk, that's problems within the project task. Or a workplace health and safety risk. So that's when we need to alert this to our internal and external groups, making sure that everybody is dealt with in a very safe fashion. So we need to think about our risks, and I'm just going to skip forward over a few things. We need to think about, is there a high, medium, or low degree of that risk? Is it very likely or unlikely to occur? So we need to very much identify our risks and make sure that we're not ignoring anything. So we have 5 options of what do we do with our risks. We can either prevent risks, so maybe put measures in place to make sure the risk doesn't occur. We can minimize the risk or reduce the risk, so make it much smaller than it needs to be. We can transfer the impact of the risk to a third party, and that's something like insurance, for example, or penalty clauses if something occurs in a project. And we have contingency plans. So for example, if we are having an event outdoors and it might rain, then we might hire a marquee, have a shelter, or have an indoor space if it's going to ruin our event. And some risks will always occur and we just need to monitor them. So our other thing we need to consider and make sure that we're not going over is our money. We can't ignore budget, it's always very important. So we need to make sure that we estimate costs accurately, that our cash flow is working according to what we thought, and that we have consultation with our shareholders and stakeholders and seek our budget to be signed off. So we need to make sure that everybody's on track in terms of expenditure. And we also, as I mentioned before, need to communicate with our stakeholders in the project. So we need to make sure that everybody is very much up to date and knows what is occurring in what sort of order and who is responsible. So here you can see a communication table, what the target audience is, what our needs are, what our deliverables are, who is responsible. This is very important. If you don't assign an actual person to this, it won't get done and the meeting won't occur, for example. The media channel, are we going to have emails? Are we going to have a phone call? Are we going to have a meeting? And how frequently this occurs. So that is just making sure all of our stakeholders are very well aware of what's transpiring in our project. In terms of module 2, do we have any questions thus far? Any questions? Anybody? Were you happy for me to just take you through the main areas of the assessment? Nobody is raising their hand, so I assume that I could just continue. So as I said, assessment 1 is due on the 24th. You can find your assessments if you click on assessments on the left-hand side of your subject, and you can see there's a link here for assessment 1. So it is a case study, and if you just click on the PDF, which I very sort of briefly breezed you through last week as to not over give you too much of a shock on day 1, you can see that you have an assessment and you need to choose one of the following projects. Please do not try and attempt all 3. They are related projects, but you need to focus on either the computer lab project, the marketing or PR campaign, or the cafe fundraiser. So you need to select one of those 3. You're given the roles and responsibilities of the team members over here, and you are given a budget. You will once again see that it either relates to the computer lab, the marketing PR campaign, or the cafe expansion. So you need to look specifically to the one that you have selected and see what is applicable. I'm not going to read through it, but I just want to draw your attention to the template, which is a really good guide to make sure that you're answering all that is required. But if you find it a bit prohibitive, like there's not enough space or anything like that, you can attach, let's say, 1 extra sheet if that's required. But because we are trying to keep it tight and making sure that you're not going off on too much of a tangent, you need to try and stick to this. So, project snapshot. This is our project development plan. Name your project, whichever of the 3 you have selected. For the project purpose, it really gives you a nice little idea here at the top in italics. So what are you trying to achieve? So explain the background to the project. What is it that we are trying to accomplish? We then have deliverables with timeframes. Try and use your SMART goals here. So this is what I mentioned: specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-framed. So what is happening, when it's happening, what are the main things that you are trying to accomplish? If you think of that work breakdown structure that we've spoken about, what are, like, let's say, the 4 or 5 main deliverables that you're trying to accomplish in this project? Then stakeholders. This is who is involved in our project. Not only who is involved, but the greater public at large and anyone who is impacted or has an interest in this project. So you need to just list them here with their names and what their roles are. Resources. So this is people resources, cash resources, equipment, facilities, tools, whatever is required in this project. And you are more than welcome to use bullet points. Risks. Try and think broadly here. There are never just, let's say, 3 risks in a project. I would like to see at least 5 that you mention, and trying to ascertain what type of risk it is and what sort of methods of treatment we might be looking at. It is a real synopsis of the main things we're going to do in the project, so you don't have to go into essays here. So just pure bullet points would be fine. Interdependencies. So how is this project related to anything else that's going on? And because the 3 projects that have been identified are very similar in nature and are connected, you can mention the other 2 that you haven't selected here. Success criteria. How are we going to know we are successful? How are we going to manage this? How are we going to monitor it? We need to put milestones into place, and those are sort of mini sub-goals. And how are we going to know when we get there? Are we going to measure it? Are we going to interview stakeholders? Are we going to see if we've accomplished all of our deliverables? How are we going to know if we've achieved what we meant to achieve? We've got our in scope and our out of scope. So in scope, let me try to get rid of that, is what are we trying to achieve in the realm of our resources. So what are, pretty much going back to those objectives that you've put over there of our deliverables, what is in scope pertaining particularly to the project? Just as importantly, we have to say what is out of scope. So for example, if we are trying to implement a software system in an organization, that's in scope. If, however, we are not going to be involved in the training of the software, that's out of scope. So if the client then comes and says they would like us to train all the staff on the software, that's fantastic, but we have to then build it into the scope. We have to budget for it. We have to change our timelines, and we almost have to treat it as a new project. So we can't go on the old parameters that we initially set up. And that is why we have to know what we are trying to accomplish and what is out of scope. There's the project title. We need to have sign off from project sponsor and project manager. I mentioned before that stakeholders need to be communicated with. So here's where you list what needs to take place, who the team member is that will be discussing these things, what the purpose is, when it's going to occur, is it going to be via email, meeting, phone call, etc. So that's our communication plan. Just scrolling down, we've got our roles and responsibilities. So you actually enter the name of the individual here, what sort of tasks they are responsible for, and just create a fake signature. So don't mind you forging fake signatures over there. Our resource and our cost plan. So what is our resource and how much it's going to cost? This is a sort of mini version of our budget. Risk. We definitely need to make sure that all our risks are identified, what the likelihood of it to occur is, how it's going to impact, and what the treatment options are. We can't just say we're going to have risks and ignore any risks that might occur. And then our budget. So we've got our income here, which needs to be totaled. All of our expenses, once again, totaled. Adding in a contingency of 10%. So we always need to have a bit of a buffer in case we go over. And everybody needs to sign off. And the last is our work breakdown structure. If you don't like it in table form here, that you're more than welcome to do it just like I showed you in that other diagram. So you can just add an attachment, looking at our level 1, our level 2, and our level 3s of a work breakdown structure, and just identifying what the main things are we're trying to achieve in this project, just breaking it down into chunks. And then our schedule. So this is leading onto our Gantt chart. All of these tasks over here in your work breakdown structure are then utilized in your Gantt chart. And you can either use the one provided or be a little more sophisticated and find a software or make your own spreadsheet or anything, filling in the bars of what the activity is going to be and how long it's going to take, and make sure that you label everything. So it is quite an interesting assessment. It's got quite a few elements involved, very much associated with our module 2. So I hope everybody's feeling a little more comfortable about what needs to take place in this assessment. And I just want to see if there's any questions. You can put your mics on and talk to me. Any questions before we sign off today? Erin, Hanif, Mary, Molly. I see a new Molly has joined us. Nika or Stacy?
No, I'm good. I really appreciate the breakdown of the assignment.
Fantastic. That's what I'm here for. We're just trying to make it less, impersonal, as online can be difficult when you are remote. So we're just trying to make it as communicating as possible. So don't feel shy to raise your hand if you have any concerns, any questions. Feel free. Anyone else have any comments or questions?
Will the recording of this session be available today or tomorrow?
Yes, so by tomorrow, it just needs to convert, and by tomorrow you will get a recording of the session. So anything that I might have gone too fast with or you want to go over, you'll just have the recording to work through again.
Great, that's great.
Anything else before we say goodbye?
Just quickly, Kelly, have you got a link of where we can find a template for the work breakdown structure?
So the one I showed you, I actually just Googled. I just went for work breakdown structure image, but I can send that to you to just get an idea of what we're trying to create.
Yeah, if you could, please. I think I did one to redraft on my redraft, and I don't know if it's going to be acceptable enough. So
with pleasure,
Yeah.
That is why when I actually saw your work, Mary, that's when it sort of occurred to me that the way it's been shown to you in the module, the way it's been set out in that fashion makes it a little bit confusing as to what's level 1, level 2, level 3. So because it's been sort of depicted, sort of going across the page horizontally instead of vertically down, it sort of makes it a bit confusing. So when I send out a copy of this live session, I'll send out, just a bit of an example as well.
Yeah, that'll be good. Thank you.
With pleasure. Anybody else? You can type to me as well if you don't feel like speaking. Nope. Everybody feeling semi-comfortable? Well, I will take it that you feel fantastic, and we will be signing off today. And by tomorrow, you will get a copy of this, as well as just an example of a work breakdown structure. So please start working on assessment 1, as it's going to come about quite quickly. It's basically a week and a half that you have until you have assessment 1. I will, in that same email that I send out to you, also put in a draft deadline so that you have an opportunity to send me what you've done, and I can just have a read over and see if you've glaringly left out anything major, so that we don't have any surprises. So thank you for your time today. I hope that has been helpful, and we will chat again next week. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. All the best.